if we look to the answer as to why for so many years we achieved so much, prospered as no other people on earth, it was because here in this land, we unleashed the energy and individual genius of man to a greater extent than has ever been done before. Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth. The price for this freedom at times has been high, but we have never been unwilling to pay that price. Those who say that we're in a time when there are no heroes, they just don't know where to look. The sloping hills of Arlington National Cemetery, with its row upon row of simple white markers bearing crosses or stars of David, they add up to only a tiny fraction of the price that has been paid for our freedom. Each one of those markers is a monument to the kind of hero I spoke of earlier. Their lives ended in places called Belleau Wood, the Argonne, Omaha Beach, Salerno, and halfway around the world on Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Pork Chop Hill, the Chosin Reservoir, and in 100 rice paddies and jungles of a place called Vietnam. Under one such marker lies a young man, Martin Treptow, who left his job in a small-town barber shop in 1917 to go to France with the famed Rainbow Division. There on the Western Front, he was killed trying to carry a message between battalions under heavy artillery fire. We're told that on his body was found a diary. On the flyleaf, under the heading, "My Pledge," he had written these words: "America must win this war. Therefore I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure. I will fight cheerfully and do my utmost as if the issue of the whole struggle depended on me alone." We must realize that no arsenal or no weapon in the arsenals of the world is so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women. It is a weapon our adversaries in today's world do not have. It is a weapon that we as Americans do have. Let that be understood by those who practice terrorism and prey upon their neighbors. As for the enemies of freedom, those who are potential adversaries, they will be reminded that peace is the highest aspiration of the American people. We will negotiate for it, sacrifice for it. We will not surrender for it now or ever. We are Americans.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lieutenant Stephen Rogers, a proud American. Boy, do we need President Ronald Reagan back at this hour. But ladies and gentlemen, we have a lot to talk about tonight because there is indeed a lot going on in the United States as I speak to you. To begin with, I sent a message out a few days ago, and some individuals did follow up on it. And when I talk about individuals, I'm really looking for the leadership of this country. Both parties need to speak up. This is what I tweeted out, and then I'll share with you why I tweeted this out. It is imperative that every American get the message out that those advocating violence before the midterms is unacceptable and serves no purpose but to destroy our country. This message should be heard from leaders of both political parties all the way down to Main Street, USA. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of talk about violence leading up to the midterms in a week or so. A lot of talk about a possible civil war in this country. I say to those Americans who advocate that, who want to get close to that, you are not an American. The worst thing that could happen to this country are Americans turning on Americans over what? Over what? Over politics. We are a civil country. We're a country that will never surrender our freedoms, but once we get to a point where we're going to fight each other, we will indeed surrender all of our freedoms. A civil war not only destroys this country from within, but you could be absolutely sure that the Chinese Communist Party, the North Korean dictator, the leader of Russia, and I could go on and on and on about many, many enemies of this country, they will be ready to destroy us. So those Americans who think that violence is the answer, do some of us a favor. Either keep your big mouth shut or get out of my country, because we are civil here and we will do things according to law within the framework of the Constitution of the United States. The entire world is watching the way we do things. So if you're going to get mad at me, some of you in the Republican Party or Democratic Party for what I said, well, you get all the mad you want to get, because I love this country so much that I believe that we have no need to turn on each other when it comes to civil disobedience to the point that we're going to be fighting each other. We have a system that works, has always worked. So let's think about the future of our children and our grandchildren as we move forward as one nation under God. Ladies and gentlemen, in addition to that, with regard to what we're going to speak about tonight, it has a lot to do with the United States and in some cases, how it relates to what is happening in Canada. I'm pleased to report to you tonight, and I will let the Canadian people know Thursday night when we air tonight in Canada, that I had the opportunity today to speak to a reporter on One America News. That is a major news network here in the United States. It'll be aired tonight at about 9 p.m. The show is called The Tipping Point. Topic of discussion, well, one of them that took most of the time I was on, Justin Trudeau. And I'll talk about him also a little later and how he is becoming a threat to the United States of America. Now, Center for Disease Control and Prevention Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices voted unanimously to approve the CDC's new recommended immunization schedule for adults and children for next year, for 2023, which adds the vax for COVID-19. The CDC, ladies and gentlemen, is a non-elected body that should be dismantled. The CDC is a nothing. It is an absolute nothing when it comes to power over the people. It is a recommendation, but the ones who will either move on that recommendation or not are the very people we elect to office. That's why it is so very important that these midterms, the people who believe in this country, who believe in individual liberty and rights, who believe in medical freedom, make sure you elect to office individuals that stand up for your rights. I've said all along, at least at this point in time in our lives, the Republican Party is the party that is going to save this country. Why? Because the Democrat Party has adopted and embraced the ideology of Marx, Lenin, and Stalin. That's my view, my opinion, and I could prove it. I just don't have 6-7 days to be on this broadcast to prove it. That's how much evidence is mounting against that party. By the way, I understand it was reported that a CDC executive, somebody kind of high on that food chain, they got their 5th booster shot, and now they have COVID. So it's up to you, folks. I've always said it's an individual decision between you and your doctor, not up to the government. Now, here in New Jersey, we have something very interesting that occurred, and I was kind of surprised to see this. New Jersey Assembly Majority Whip Carol Murphy, Democrat, of course, from Mount Laurel, wants the legislature to condemn Florida Governor Ron DeSantis for sending migrants to Martha's Vineyard. Murphy, and this is what I wrote, Murphy, you need to mind your own business and clean up the mess that your party created here in New Jersey. A poor publicity stunt. Now, this is what's amazing about what she actually tweeted out, all right, or what she actually stated. She's upset that Ron DeSantis sent the migrants to Martha's Vineyard, where all of the rich, famous, and wealthy live. My goodness, the 50 migrants that were shipped there by DeSantis caused a firestorm up at Martha's Vineyard, a firestorm. But she didn't mention the thousands that Biden is sending to New York, Chicago, Seattle. She didn't mention the thousands of migrants being bussed all over the country, including here in New Jersey. Why didn't she mention that? Why did she not mention that? Why did she not condemn Biden and what he has done? Because you see, folks, it boils down to this with the Democrat Party. And this is why I ask every American listening, especially some of you are Democrat conservatives and independents, to listen very carefully to what we're sharing with you. This has become a political football. Not concerned about you or me, our neighborhoods, not concerned about the security of the United States, but concerned about a woke agenda, a communist agenda, a political agenda. That's what this is all about. Now, Dr. Fauci's back in the news. And this is really interesting, folks. Apparently, the Boston University doctors created a new COVID variant that has 80% kill rate. They created the variant with an 80% kill rate, funded by Dr. Fauci and the NIH. Now, the House Republican Oversight Committee members released never-before-seen emails in January 2022 showing Dr. Fauci may have concealed information about COVID-19 originating from the Wuhan lab and then intentionally downplaying the leak theory publicly. You see, we always had our suspicions about Dr. Fauci, didn't we? But now that his career is coming to an end, a lot of truth is going to be told. Now, this just in a few hours ago, attorney generals in Missouri and Louisiana have compiled several pieces of evidence that shows Dr. Fauci worked directly with tech companies to steer public discussion about COVID-19 and shut down talk of its origin, which includes direct conversations with some other people involved in the tech chain, including Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg. So there was some collusion, alleged collusion between Fauci, the people who run these high-tech live streaming networks, and others to kind of downplay and maybe stay away from the theory that it came out of the Wuhan lab. Well, if Dr. Fauci is subpoenaed, which he should be, before a congressional House committee, which I hope will occur after January 20th of 2023, when Congress takes control, that guy should go to jail. He should be locked up. If he did anything criminally, he should be locked up. He should lose his pension. He should lose everything, because him and the Democrats, in my view, brought so much harm to this country, so much harm, frightening trauma, mental health issues, kids in trouble because they were locked up in either their classrooms or their homes. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Not to mention the senior citizens that died, and people couldn't even go to the funerals of their loved ones because of the rules that were set by the CDC and perhaps people like Dr. Fauci and the Democrat Party. Now we go on to something that does involve Justin Trudeau, and this is what I talked about, or will be talking about tonight on One American News. Now, Justin Trudeau is bragging about his new gun control measures in Canada. So I put this out earlier. Justin Trudeau is leaving every law-abiding citizen in Canada defenseless by enacting gun control laws that are an open invitation to the most violent criminals in North America. He needs to visit D.C., he needs to visit Chicago, and then he'll learn how ineffective gun control really is. Chicago, folks. Justin, I know you're probably not watching and listening, but some of your lower minions may be watching, because I'm sure somebody out there in Justin land is watching not only me, but the other broadcasts that are upsetting you quite much. Well, here, Justin, here's what's going on in the most strict gun control cities in the United States. Chicago, 12 killed, 45 wounded this weekend. 9 people were shot to death in a 12-hour span from Saturday night to early Sunday, according to the Chicago police, week before that. In 2022, 564 victims were killed in Chicago, mostly by guns. Now, Justin Trudeau, as you will hear on the news tonight if you watch it, claims that he wants to model his gun control laws after the policies of the United States. Justin, you've got to be out of your mind. You have to be absolutely out of your mind. Trying to make people believe that you're going to introduce policies related to gun control that mirror the United States, because the gun control policies in the United States are increasing gun violence, not reducing it. Chicago, Washington, New York, gun violence is up. Why? Because those are the cities that leave people defenseless. In the cities where people have a right to bear arms, a right to carry, a right to own weapons, and when they use that weapon, they use it within the framework of the law. That's what you don't hear and you'll never see on the mainstream media. But those are the policies, the gun control policies are the ones that are increasing violence because it's taking the guns out of the hands of people who can defend themselves. Criminals, Justin, are going to flow into your country. The organized crime, the black market. Why? Because you just put a big sign up. Gun-free Canada. The entire country's a gun-free zone. Come on in, guys. Vacation in Canada. Well, they're going to come to vacation, Justin. And believe me, I think you're going to regret, maybe you won't, but some of the people who support this policy and are being led down a real dark path need to wake up. So what I shared with the media last night was Justin Trudeau is not mirroring the policies of the United States with regard to gun control. He is actually mirroring the policies of his buddy, President Xi, with the Chinese Communist Party, because it's all about control, not guns, it's control over the people. It's keep the people under the thumb of the government. And I even mentioned it publicly, and those of you who watch it tonight, that Justin Trudeau, at least in my view, is becoming a national security threat to the United States of America. So, Justin, that's a dark path you're going down, but we'll talk about that when all hell breaks loose in Canada and you're out of office and there's somebody in there that's going to represent the will of the people. Also, folks, one more thing, and then we're going to get to our fine guest. We, Campaign for America, did send a letter. It's posted to congressmen. In fact, we're still sending them out. We've got about 500 or plus we've got to send out that is asking them to review the vaccine mandate and to drop it and to allow people who live in Canada to come to the United States without any type of proof of vaccination. We cited some things in that letter. It is posted. And if you wish folks to get a copy of that letter or the link, what I'm going to do is see this coming up here. Look at that, folks. I'll leave that there for a minute. That's an email. Just email us and we'll get the link. How's that sound? You'll be able to read the letter yourself. All right, folks. Now I have a great guest on, Sterling Schwab. Sterling is on our board of directors here at Campaign for America. He's been doing a lot of work with regard to helping us build an educational package for not only people across the United States, but also for those of us who are passing laws that are affecting us. So, Sterling, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you coming on tonight.
Steve, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. One caveat. Last time I was on, I remember there was a lot of after interview Twitter feeds or stuff on the feed asking if I was related to Klaus Schwab. I am not related to Klaus Schwab, and I do not subscribe to the World Economic Forum's policies and positions. Just so everybody knows.
Well, I'm glad you straightened that out because I could imagine the emails I'd be getting tonight.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Now
let's having me on. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you coming on. All right, so let's talk about a few things here that are troubling not only here in the United States that a lot of Americans watching don't know, and also the Canadians. Let's talk about what I never thought I'd believe that I'd ever see in this country: Chinese police departments, Chinese police precincts in New York, in Canada. So you've done some work on that. Could you share with us what you found out?
Yeah, it seems true. It does seem. It seems like there's. I don't know if it's at the federal level or the state level, but there has to be some sort of involvement where the United States and it appears Canada are allowing the Chinese police apparatus, I guess you would want to call it, to come in and monitor some of their own citizens here, and they're doing it under the guise of tax evasion, it seems. But really, they're going after, it seems, Chinese nationals who are speaking out against the Communist Party, against President Xi, and they're actually being harassed. And there appears to be some evidence that they're actually tracking down those individuals in the United States and threatening them to go back to China. perhaps because they have family members back there, they have business operations back there, and they're really being threatened with that. And Steve, that's really all part of just a larger strategy the Chinese Communist Party has for infiltrating and attacking the United States. And this just seems to be one of the latest, latest strategies in that big picture that they're exercising against us.
Sterling, when the shooting stops in New York, I'm going to see if I could get to that city, and I want to visit one of these police departments. I also want to speak to somebody at one police plaza and ask the question that you just asked. Who approved this? Is it federal? Is it city? I mean, I can't imagine other than allowing spies. I mean, look at you. You and I have been around a long time, all right? We've been involved with this business a long time.
Yeah.
You've got to know that those cops from China are part of the Chinese National Party intelligence apparatus. You got to know that.
Sometimes even higher than that. Sometimes there's highs. They're members, right below the Politburo level. I mean, these are not low level federal Chinese police officers they are sending here. These are the cream of the crop. These are people who they know what they're coming after. You could say they have the black book of names they want to go after. They know what they're doing.
All right, so now, so we've got the Chinese police departments here in the United States, in New York. I believe there are some in Toronto too, correct? Some of the Chinese.
I've read that. I have read that. I've seen some reporting on that. Yeah, not perhaps just in Toronto, but also I've read. I don't know for sure, but some anecdotal information I've read. In Edmonton area, or Edmonton, Manitoba, in maybe Saskatoon, which I don't have any idea why they'd be there, but certainly Montreal and Toronto. But there's been anecdotal, British Columbia even.
This is absolutely incredible. I mean, to put them in our country, on our streets. And you're right, they're not looking for tax evaders. They're looking for dissenters, for people who escaped communist China. And they want to intimidate them and bully them, and probably I wonder, I have no idea, and something maybe we could ask if when we go to New York is, what's the arrest procedure? Do they just take somebody off the street, throw them in a van, and lock them up? Do they?
It's amazing. I really don't know how they're doing it. Are they? I don't even know yet if they have some of our federal agents with them or local police department. I don't know. Or even, are they taking IRS agents with them? It's just amazing. It's amazing to think we would agree to something like this.
Well, we had a Chinese communist operative literally go to bed with one of our representatives in Congress. So why not go to bed with some cops? I mean, I'll tell you, the PBA, the people of New York, any city in this country, the people should be raising hell. Speaking of raising hell, have you seen or heard or read anything about any of our lawmakers? Because I'll tell you, the one bone of contention I have with our government, all right, they're ignorant to a lot of things that are going on in this country. I mean, I wonder how many officials know that Chinese Communist Party operatives or Chinese police departments are here. Did you hear about it?
You hear crickets, right? You hear crickets. You don't hear anybody talking about it. Occasionally, you'll hear somebody mention in a big broad brush the challenges we're having with China. That's all you ever hear. It's just amazing to me. None of our leadership is really getting involved on really either side of the aisle. And I don't know if it's because we're so engaged in the internal battles and they don't realize the external threat that's really facing us and facing Canada. It's a lot more dire than people think. And the more you begin to read about it, it's a strategy that is it's a long game strategy. It goes deep. It's penetration of just about, it seems, every government entity we have in the country. They are looking for that soft spot to get into it. And this is just one of the latest and the greatest.
We've said all along that what's going on in Canada is, at least I've said, all right, all along, what's going on in Canada could become and is becoming a national security threat to the United States. One thing I'd like to find out, if there was any linkage between Trudeau and Biden, or our government and the Canadian government, any linkage regarding the establishment of these Chinese police departments. Certainly, no one's going to lead me to believe there wasn't any linkage with regard to the Ministry of Truth. Remember that? Trudeau comes out and he's still working on what they call Bill C-11. I don't know if they changed the number of the bill to put up what I call the 21st century Berlin Wall. This is an electronic wall, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you in the United States who don't know that, the Canadian government really, truly, in my view, okay, always say my view, Sterling, because the fact checkers will put a little note,
Yes.
It's his view, not ours,
Yes.
how it goes. So I don't want to get you Facebook land people all excited. Just calm down now, relax, take it easy. The Canadian government appears to want to monitor the content of what's streaming into their country and what's leaving their country. We'd be off the air in 1 minute and 20 seconds if they're allowed to do that, because we tell the truth. So now, as Trudeau introduces that, we got Joe Biden introduces the Ministry of Truth. What does that say to you, the Ministry of Truth?
Yeah, everything you can imagine a communist regime is trying to institute, right? And doesn't it seem to you and the other viewers on tonight's podcast that more and more we seem to be imitating a little bit behind whatever the Chinese are doing? It just seems over and over our governments are the eye in the sky, the ears are always listening, the perpetual listening, looking at what everybody's saying and doing to make sure there's not too much disagreement. It's just amazing. It really is amazing how deep this is going now.
Well, I'm glad to see across the United States, people are truly, truly rising up within the framework of the law. I mean, we've got school board meetings are being packed now by parents. People are running for a school board, city councils, state offices. In fact, I remember you stood up as busy as you are. You were running for the United States Congress at one point.
Great experience, a great experience. I will tell you, citizens are frustrated. They're frustrated because they think the government is just too involved in their lives. And the government is trying to shove down our throats things we don't necessarily don't mean that much to us. In Canada, the United States, we want to be fair, right? We always want to be fair to each other. We don't need all this stuff being, constantly shoved at us, especially with the school boards. Look at how our government, replied to the school boards, right? I mean, you had the FBI actually getting involved. It's the craziest thing. It's really, and now with the Chinese in our country, and Steve, let's just go back to the Chinese for a minute. The Chinese police in the country is just one of the latest things we're learning about. The depth of the penetration of our country, buying up of some of our best high-tech companies in the United States, supplanting themselves on boards of directors, to try to continue to steal some of our best high-tech, high-tech, I don't know what you want to call it, manufacturing. It's just amazing what they're doing. And it just seems to me like nobody's paying attention to it. The government's more interested in watching us than in helping us. That's really the impression. That's what I got out of running. Why isn't the government, citizens don't want money. They don't want handouts. They just want to make sure they're being left alone to do what they need to do, support our families, attend our churches, practice our religion, and be left alone. That's really what I found running for Congress. And then, everything else has just been added on to that. As you learn, as you go along, you learn. And these are things you learn along the way. The Chinese communist infiltration is just the latest thing, I've learned. And that's really from going out and running and hearing what people had to say and the concern people have.
Well, we went through this in the 50s and the 60s, 70s. In fact, the time Ronald Reagan was the president of the Screen Actors Guild in Hollywood. I mean, he took down the Soviet Communist Party. And he vowed then, back way before he became president, that he would take them down. And of course, him, Margaret Thatcher, and Pope John Paul were very responsible for taking the Soviet Communist Party down. So we're kind of reliving history, except the magnitude of what we're seeing is far greater. Now, someone told me this last week, so I want to ask you on the air. If you don't have the answer, I understand it. But somebody told me that the Chinese actually had something to do with the Macy's Day Parade in New York. I
had a colleague point this out to me. I was I've been trying to find out how much property the Chinese government actually owns in the United States. And this guy's done some research on it himself. And I don't know if it was the Macy's Day Parade, the ball. It was actually, we were talking, the Macy's Day Parade. Well, there's two stories. The Macy's Day Parade is actually, he said, funded a lot by the Chinese government. And he said, it's not that hard to find. You just need to, he told me, go do a little digging yourself. You'll find it's not that difficult to uncover that information. But then we got on to the New Year's Eve ball dropping. And I don't know if it was the 2022, the 2021, or the 2020. He said, just look at Ryan Seacrest standing there. He said a few minutes before the ball drop. He said, there's a man standing behind him, not saying a word. Nobody's talking to him. Roger Seacrest doesn't acknowledge he's there. He said, that guy is a Chinese operative in the United States. He said, the Chinese actually paid for that ball to drop that year. The Chinese Communist Party. I have not been able to find that information out yet. And it was one of those things where we're talking, he's done a lot more research than I have on this. And he, in a way, he was just kind of trying to show me this is where you really need to look. And what he's really saying to me is the Chinese are deeper in our country than you imagine. And he said they own more than you think. He said, some of the major buildings in New York City, they have heavy investments in. And I asked him, why would they have heavy investments in something around, let's say, Rockefeller Center or Times Square? And he said, sometimes, people buy stuff to show you they do have the means, they do have the wherewithal, and they are in a position of power. But he said, more importantly, he told me, he said, start looking at some of the major companies they're invested in. He said, you don't have to own the whole company in the United States. He said, if you own a good percentage of it, less than even 25%, he said, you can begin having your people appointed to the board of directors. He said, you don't need a lot. He said, on a board of directors of 11 or 12 or 13 people, you only need 2 spots. And he said, you can influence a company tremendously. And he told me where to begin looking. And it's been eye-opening. It has been eye-opening. Some of our major power suppliers in the United States have investments in them. Some of the biggest properties, some of the biggest high-tech firms have Chinese investments in them.
You find farmland being brought up by the Chinese
you do. You do. Yeah. And farms and they like to, somebody, this gentleman also told me, he said, the Chinese are the most sophisticated capitalists you will ever see. He said, when they do something, they go in all the way and they invest. They like to invest in the entire supply chain. They want to be throughout the whole thing. So you buy the land, you buy the chicken farms, you buy the chicken manufacturing plant, you own the whole thing. And, so you own it from where the grain is growing to where the chickens are raised, where the chickens are slaughtered, to packaging, the whole thing. And of course we know they own some of the biggest steamship companies in the world, and you own the whole thing. And I don't think Americans have really caught on to that. If you want to make batteries, you want to own the mine where the semi-precious metals are mined. You want to own the manufacturing plant. You want to own the planning for that as well. You want to own, if you come up with a new way to make a battery and you want to have it, what's it called when you go to the government and you have the plans are made so nobody else can do it.
Patent, copyright patent.
You want to own the patent. I mean, there are some of the Chinese are some of the largest patent filers in the United States. Most people don't know this.
Well, I must say this as we move on. It's important, folks, that we understand there are a lot of wonderful Chinese Americans in this country.
Completely,
they
yes.
escaped communism. They
Yes.
love America. And unfortunately, the Chinese Communist Party don't care about them. In fact, they're probably so scared to death because I'm sure they know what's going on. And it's our duty to protect them as well as any other Americans. So we need to keep that in mind. That there are Chinese Americans in this country, and I have some of them who are friends of mine, and I know you too, Sterling.
Absolutely, absolutely. One more, Steve. One more point to that too is, I believe it's 7 of the top 10 Chinese news stations in China are also here in the United States. And since Donald Trump was president, under him, they began making a lot of these companies, the presidents who sit on the Politburo, they're very high-ranking people in the Communist Party. Beginning with President Trump, they actually made these people start registering as foreign agents in the United States. And they did, and the Chinese, the Chinese government, just to show how angry they were about this, actually started expelling U.S. news journalists from China. And these were not undercover journalists; these were people from the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the New York Post, the L.A. Times. Some upstanding journalists who could no longer stay in the United States because our government was doing the right thing and making these Chinese communists undercover at these news organizations register as federal agents.
You know what I find amazing is
foreign agents. Excuse me.
What I find amazing are people in this country who are owners of these high-tech companies, who have these big organizations, whether they be pharmaceutical companies or corporations. They've got to know that they're being used as puppets by the Chinese Communist Party, and they will become like beef being led to a slaughterhouse.
Oh, absolutely.
Because communists, you and I know this well. Yeah. They will use Americans as much as they could, and then they'll just chew you up and spit you out. So their lifespan, at least politically and maybe physically, is short. I mean, yes. I mean, you think. Look at what did you think? Okay, when you saw the former president of China sitting next to President Xi, kind of, just publicly in front of the world, really kind of grabbed. I mean, and just escorted out. The guy wanted to stay. That's how it works, right?
Yeah, it's unreal. Where is he? You'll never hear. They'll just ensconce him in his house. It's almost like you almost feel like it's house arrest for these guys, out of power in an instant. It's just it's the way those brutal regimes work. It's just unfortunate. And so by the way, the things you said early in your broadcast about nonviolence, so true. It's so true. We are Canada, the United States, we're countries of laws. You want to fight at the political box. Get your ideas out there. The best ideas always win.
Well, the Canadian people, they're going to find out tonight. Hopefully, it'll be the beginning now of the media in the United States picking up what we've been doing. And I believe we're successful now. I was so happy when I got the call from One America News that finally a news outlet I mean, I'll tell you what, I mean, I'm not going to say that they eviscerated Trudeau, but I got to tell you, they gave me leeway to say whatever I wanted to say. And it was all truthful. And the point is this, Sterling, I would suppose that when you were campaigning, as I was campaigning at the time I ran for office, people they're looking for leaders. They're looking for leaders who are going to stand up and speak about the right way to do things. Unfortunately, we're paralyzed in this country because everybody's calling everybody names. And what bothers me is the vicious attacks on the Republican Party by Republicans.
Yes, it's terrible.
And it's horrible. Now, I know when you ran, or when you were ready to run, you were really ready to go. And then for the good of the country, and I got to give you credit for this, for the good of the country, you abandon your efforts now. Doesn't mean you won't run again in the future, but you did something extraordinary. You decided not to run. And I know you even went and gave some campaign contributions back to the people
I did.
Who contributed to you.
I did.
Now, my point is this, that unfortunately, in the Republican Party, where we absolutely need to win, we have Republicans saying, well, you know what? The fact of the matter is that I don't like this Republican because they're 20% against what I want, and forget the 80% what I want. I mean, how did we overcome that in your view? They're looking. People watching tonight in America are looking for somebody like Ronald Reagan, all right, who knew how to have He knew how to have a battle with Tip O'Neill. I mean, all day long, and then go out for a scotch afterwards.
Yeah. Isn't that great? Don't you wish we could do that today? Ideas. ideas don't make us enemies. Abraham Lincoln, what was Abraham Lincoln's famous saying? If we agree on 70% or 80% of everything, it's a great thing to be. Do you agree with everything with your wife or your children? You never do. You're not going to demonize your family because you just say, well, some families do today, but you shouldn't, right? I mean, my wife and I have had tons of disagreements. I have a couple of friends who are hard left Democrats, and they'll call me up to come over and hang out for a while. I'll do the same with them. Let the better ideas win. The people will decide. We don't need to punch each other in the face over ideas. And a lot of times people, we sometimes don't like to agree publicly after we've taken a position. A lot of times secretly we'll say, yeah, you know what, that was actually a better idea than mine. But you don't like to say it publicly. So yeah, there's no reason for all the violence. There really isn't.
There isn't. And so the other thing is this. Canada was interesting. Their truckers' protest.
I'm in the trucking industry. Thought it was great.
Well, I mean, it's how peaceful it was.
Yeah.
I mean, and law abiding. My worry about protesting, especially here, and getting back to the Chinese Communist Party, what would prevent the communists from sending agitators and violent people to these peaceful protests and just create a massive mess?
Yeah. Do you remember? Most people won't remember this, but there was a street in Seattle right before those protests got violent a few years ago, where the families that lived on, it was a long block in Seattle. A bunch of people got together and they actually they organized a patrol of their street because they knew what was going to happen, that windows would be broken, cars smashed, set on fire. And they were behind that famous barricade. They actually patrolled their street and for about 2 weeks, night and day, and kept the riffraff out because they knew it wasn't the people in Seattle doing that. It was outside people from the outside coming in and stoking that violence. And they were on television. And they were of every political persuasion, every different races, different creeds, different colors. That story got missed. I wished a follow-up on that would have been done because I remember it was a quick interview and they were out there with baseball bats. They said, they're not going to do that on our street. We know what's coming. You never heard a follow-up on that.
Hey, look, I saw videos of a Korean couple who had a store in one of these cities with shotguns. And these protesters that were burning buildings down wouldn't go near them. Yeah. That's why you need a Second Amendment in every country on the face of the earth.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Listen, before we wrap up this segment, a couple of things. One, I'll certainly give you the last word. And two, how about some encouraging words for citizens to get involved?
Yeah. How about that? Everybody on this podcast, right? These are the, how do you say, not the middle class. These are the salt of the country, of Canada, of the United States, the people that actually care, right? You care about your families, you care about your schools, you care about your history, your culture. People I talk to, nobody's afraid of change. We don't want unnecessary, needless things jammed down our throats. That's what people want. Being out on the campaign trail, that's what I learned. Nobody's afraid of change. Just make it good change. Make it fair change. That's what people really want. And all the good people on this podcast tonight, they're watching this. These are the people that really care about their country. They're not looking to throw their agenda on anybody. We're also not looking to have anybody's agenda thrown on us that we don't need. That's people out there. Keep up the good work. Keep doing what you're doing. Get up every day. Do what you do every single day. You'll be okay. That's what I would say. It will be okay.
And you and I talked about one other thing.
Keep fighting the good fight.
Yep. And in fighting the good fight, I know you and I talked about this, and I'd like to share this with people too, and I know you will, is there is a God above.
Absolutely.
We need to pray.
100%. We talk about that all the time.
And the thing I like about you, I've served in the Navy with you.
Yeah.
Who would have believed you and I would be doing this after our Navy career?
Man, oh man.
But you have a heart for God. I know you do. And I just want to publicly thank you for that.
Just so everybody on the podcast knows, I have a few friends, a few close friends. Steve's one of them. if I'm reading the Bible and I don't understand something, I'll call you or a couple of my other friends. I'll say, I read this and I don't understand it. I got caught up in numbers in the Old Testament. I had to call you and ask. I said, holy moly, this is really deeper than I thought. And you kind of walked me through that a little bit. Or if I'm reading Psalms and I'm reading something like, I don't understand this. What does this really mean? And I appreciate that. I really do.
Thank you. I appreciate you. And listen, we got a couple of meetings coming up, and
Absolutely.
We'll do what we got to do to help the Canadian people and help our country. And thanks for joining me there. You're a commander, huh?
Yeah. I'm coming to the end, though. The end is near. The retirement's coming. But to all the people in Canada on this podcast, we're watching everything down here. God bless you guys up there. Keep the faith in your country. It's a great country. It's a strong country. And I'm really pulling for you guys up there, you men and women up there. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you. God bless you. Salute you, my friend.
Thank you, Steve. Same to you, buddy.
Stand by, folks. Sterling is leaving us. I'm going to share a few more closing remarks with you, and I'll share them right now. We have a big problem down the road, and I predicted this. I've said this since day one, since the day that the Russians invaded Ukraine, that Joe Biden instigated this war, that in my view, he instigated this war. In my view, he has pretty much broken up NATO. Of course, out in the public, we're going to see that NATO is all put together and they're all patting each other on the back and everybody's ready to go to war. Well, in my view, that's not the case. But Joe Biden said something very, very telling. In fact, frightening to a lot of people who have young kids in the military. Joe Biden said a couple of days ago that the United States military is prepared to fight the Russians in Ukraine. Now, I said a long time ago, folks, to be careful, watch out, keep an eye on this. This is Vietnam all over again. And I'm not going to go through that history again, but it's leading up to a ground war with the Russians in Ukraine. I do not believe that Germany, that France, that any member of NATO is going to send a massive amount of ground troops into Ukraine. Germany and France especially are about to freeze to death because they don't have the oil. They don't have the gas. They don't have the energy to keep them warm in the winter. Compliments of who? Not Vladimir Putin. Compliments of Joe Biden. Joe Biden has messed this whole planet up. His policies are disastrous. And what's really, really terrible is the fact that Democrats out there who support this guy, who support his policies, who support that party, may be very well sending their young children, their young sons and daughters to combat. Joe Biden put the number 4,700 troops of the 101st Airborne. Do you think 4,700 troops are going to make a difference with 100,000 plus Russian troops in Ukraine? Do you think what we have there is going to make a difference when Vladimir Putin, it is said by analysts, is only using 20% of his firepower? Where's the other 80%? And how much firepower is that? We must keep in mind that Putin is the former director of the Soviet KGB. He is a smart man. I do not condone anything he's done. I do not condone war. I do not like the idea that civilians are being killed, that young kids, whether they be in Ukraine military, the Russian military, any military, are being slaughtered for political reasons. But there is a history. There is a history that goes way back regarding why we are at the point we are between Russia and Ukraine today. And it's something we all need to look at and to understand. But my question is, when is it going to end? When is the United States going to end it? Meaning, when are we going to end sending billions of dollars to Ukraine when our own country is falling apart? The new Secretary of State under the new Biden administration, if he would ever win again, which I don't believe he will be President Zelensky of Ukraine. He's running United States foreign policy as far as I'm concerned. He had the nerve to go to the UN and kind of demand, well, we need more money from the United States. He wants money out of my pocket and yours. Think about that. Think about that guy. So, folks, I got to tell you, pray to God that this president doesn't, in the next 2 weeks at least, because the midterms are coming, and I kind of am thinking that this guy may lead us into a terrible, terrible situation. And if U.S. combat troops end up in Ukraine, I fear what's going to happen to these young men and women. And those of you who are young people, in fact, I'm probably going to end up going on TikTok again. I got such a response from young people, and I want to talk to young people who seem to flock to that, although I don't like it, but they flock to that. And I want them to understand that they need to do what we didn't do prior to the Vietnam War. They need to get out there and they need to get involved politically. They need to make it very clear to their elected officials that they will not tolerate a war that has nothing to do with the national security of the United States of America. No one's been able to prove me that Ukraine has anything to do with the national security of the United States of America. And if it does, well, you know what? Then France, Germany, all those European NATO allies, you guys send your blood. You send your troops. Enough of American blood has been spilled upon every piece of real estate on this planet. And the ones that helped us, yes, I know the Brits helped us, and I know France and Germany. I know they helped us in World War II and a lot of these wars. But let me tell you this, folks. This is a fact. When many of the young people in this country ran north to Canada, who would not go to Vietnam, and I think they were wrong. I believe they were wrong. We were engaged in a war. We should have had everybody that was able to go should have been standing shoulder to shoulder with their fellow citizens. While they were running to Canada, the Canadians were running here to join, to help the Americans through that war. That's why I'm so determined to help the Canadian people, so determined to help that ally. They never let us down. They even shed blood on our behalf to help us in Vietnam. And that's the way it's always been. So that's why, folks, some of you who may ask, well, why is all this about Canada and USA? That's one of the reasons. So keep in mind, there is light at the end of the tunnel. November 8th, the United States of America is going to have midterm elections. We've got to get the United States Congress and control the Republicans as well as the Senate. And if you hear of a Republican criticizing a Republican, you know what? Maybe you want to pick up the phone or write a letter. Maybe a letter is going to take too long, but pick up the phone, call their campaign and tell them to knock it off. Because it's not about party politics now. It's about this right here, this great, wonderful symbol of freedom. And that's where our mind should be focused. There's a God above. We pray for peace. We pray for God's hand upon our country. It always has been and always will be. And we must always keep our eyes right up. I look upon the hills. My eyes look upon the hills, whence cometh my help. So at this hour, we need to pray, and we need to, for divine intervention, to at least prevent a war and to help us get our country back together. We've always done that from 1776. Well, it's always worked, and it's going to work now. That's it. See you Thursday night, Thursday night, tonight in Canada. We have another special guest on. Now, folks, you see where it says for information and commentaries? Go to that website. That's one of ours. Go to that website, and you'll see where there'll be commentaries. And I believe on top of the list is the letter that we had sent to the U.S. or we're sending to the United States Congress, as well as you'll see some other information. And by the way, I'll talk about what I was going to just say some other time. But right now, folks, that's it. I want to thank you for joining us. Just go right to that website. You'll see our commentaries, and I want to thank you all for joining us. Remember, there's a God above. He loves you. He loves your country. He loves wherever freedom and liberty flourish. Gifts from him are never taken away from him or us by anyone on this earth. I'm Lieutenant Stephen Rogers. See you Thursday night.